Hello, I'm Dominic Danos, Global Managing Partner of the Danos Group. I'm delighted to have Noah Perlman here today for our monthly Pathways to Success podcast. Noah is currently COO at Gemini, the market-leading crypto exchange, and a long-standing client to the Danos Group. Welcome, Noah.
Great to be here, Dominic. Thanks for having me.
No, for our listeners, do you want to give us a bit of an intro into yourself and your career to date to start us off?
Sure. After law school, a fairly traditional path, big law firm, Davis Polk, followed by a judicial clerkship, then federal prosecutor for a period of time. Then I did a stint at actually the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, where I was general counsel of the New York division. Fantastic job. When I left DEA, joined the private sector and spent the bulk of my private sector career at Morgan Stanley, over a decade in a variety of legal and compliance roles. And a little over a year ago, joined Gemini, first as their chief compliance officer, and then more recently moving on to the operations side, where I'm now chief operating officer.
Diverse and interesting background. And just in terms of Gemini, do you just want to give us again a bit of an intro into Gemini, the firm?
Sure. So Gemini is a crypto native platform. We are an exchange. So think of us like the New York Stock Exchange in terms of one line of our business where people can come to buy, sell, and store cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, Ethereum, we have a number of tokens that we list as well. And we like to think of ourselves as the bridge to the future of money. So some of your viewers may be very familiar with Bitcoin and crypto. Others may be curious or have heard something about it. And there's a lot of, for folks who are less familiar with it, there's some fear, uncertainty. Do I have to have something called private keys? What if I lose my password? And Gemini seeks to solve all of that. In a sense, you don't need special hardware. We've got a beautiful web interface, a mobile app. One can sign on in a matter of minutes and very easily start trading and investing in crypto.
Coming into Gemini was obviously building out both the regulatory frameworks and then broadly in the COO role, the market infrastructure, and really understanding some of the challenges of doing that in what is a relatively new business, but also a relatively new sector as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dominic, and it's a real challenge because for firms like Gemini who are in this new industry, but operating under more traditional regulatory regimes, you've got that tension between how do we innovate, how do we move fast, quickly, but how do we also comply with all the regulations and obligations expected of firms that are operating in financial services. And one of the real challenges is it's not a level playing field. We have a view that compliance first, regulation first. One of our mantras is we ask for permission, not forgiveness, when seeking out to do new businesses. Not everybody in the space does that. So it's a challenge sometimes when you see competing firms taking market share, operating in a way that we know is not in the sort of letter of the law or the regulation, and it's frustrating because we want to play by the rules. And to be clear, many firms play by the rules. This is not to suggest we're the only one who is trying to be compliant. There's a lot of very good actors, but as in any booming industry, there are people who take a different philosophy. But we have maintained our philosophy since our outset. We're going to be compliant, and we're going to sort of work with our regulators to advance this industry.
Fantastic. I suppose, obviously, I mean, we first met when you were at Morgan Stanley, and I'm keen to understand, I'm sure many people would be, I suppose, the differences of working at a Morgan Stanley versus a Gemini, a large-scale banking group versus, a digital currency exchange, right? It's a very different setup. So keen to understand what those key differences are. What we're seeing in the market at the moment is a big acceleration of talent moving away from these large-scale banking groups to these types of sectors, organizations, etc. So really keen to understand those differences.
Yeah. so many differences. So where to begin?
Okay.
Obviously, scale is a huge one, and the scale manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But one way that it does, which I was sort of commenting on to a colleague just the other day, is this concept of muscle memory. When you're dealing at the big firm, whether it's a law firm or a banking firm with thousands, tens of thousands of people in some cases, incredible talent, there is going to be this concept of muscle memory. There's almost no situation that occurs where someone in the firm hasn't seen something similar. Even if there's a novel twist, there's a pattern, there's a playbook, there's a way to approach it. By contrast, Gemini, we're around 300 people now, actually 330, phenomenally talented, ambitious, hardworking people. But just the virtue of the scale and also the tenure that folks have worked in the industry, as with a lot of startups, we tend to skew younger. So there isn't that built-in muscle memory, which is exciting. We'll see stuff that's new all the time and have to figure it out, often from scratch. But that's one of the challenges. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be in the industry is to learn new things and to continue to sort of push this industry forward.
And with that, have you seen a lot of the people, the 330 people that have joined Gemini, a lot of those from similar backgrounds like yourself, from the kind of leading FS large-scale firms?
Absolutely. We see a great migration of talent from big firms on the banking side. And again, it's interesting because every time a individual with some pedigree comes into the industry, it gives comfort for everyone else to make the jump. Brian Brooks, as folks may know, who's now the controller of the OCC, previously was the general counsel, chief legal officer at Coinbase. And I had mentioned to Brian when he was still at Coinbase that his move into the industry, when I was considering my move, sort of gave me comfort. If somebody as distinguished and as accomplished as Brian had confidence to make the move, it gave me comfort that I could. And since my move into the industry, I've heard from other people who have recently joined that I served the same role for them that Brian did for me. So it is interesting how that works.
No, fantastic. And then lastly, I suppose what we ask a question on all podcasts is, what's your top advice for career advancement for anybody, obviously, particularly your background across that legal and compliance sector?
Yeah, so again, we could do a whole podcast on this. I have a top 10 list of career advice. So I think maybe this advice will be skewed a little bit towards more people more junior in their careers who are starting out. And it's advice that I received and has been incredibly beneficial at the start of my career. And it's this, which is and I think it applies really across fields, whether it's law, banking, compliance. When you're starting out in your career, often it might be a challenge to figure out how you can add value beyond sort of your day-to-day. And the advice that was given to me, which I loved, was, and it seemed simple, be the factual expert on whatever topic or meeting is coming. And when the factual expert, not just what's on scope or in scope for that particular meeting, but anything you can think of that'll be tangential that may come up. Because you might not be the subject matter expert, there may be people with decades more experience, but it is an equal playing field when it comes to the facts. And often a question will come up, and if you're the only person in the room that knows the answer, it's incredibly powerful.
It's absolutely great advice. No, well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for all of that excellent advice. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Dominic. Really great to be here.
Great stuff. Many thanks.